welcome to Meet the Artist. I'm Jana Lasort, and I'm here today with two of my favorite guys from Maplewood, photographers and artists extraordinaire. Actually, I should divulge some of my personal relationships with them. E.J. Carr. Hi, E.J.
Hi.
E.J. Carr is a photographer who works above me in my office space and is actually my landlord. So I hope to get some discount on this. And Howard Stein is a good friend and a photographer and a sculptor who lives in Maplewood as well, and always makes me laugh. So I'm really going to enjoy this show today. So we're here today to talk about photography, and we'll get into Howard's second art skill as a sculptor a little later. But E.J., let's start with you.
Okay.
You've had quite a career. You've been a photographer now, professional photographer, your mainstay profession for 25 years or so?
25 years.
Okay. Yes. This is an example of E.J.'s work on the cover of New Jersey Monthly. And you mentioned that the editor of this actually lives in Maplewood.
David Shamil.
David Shamil.
Lives in Maplewood.
So we've got quite an abundant load of talent in our community, as we all know. So, E.J., let's talk about photography a little bit in terms of how you got started, first of all.
Okay. I got started by accident. I was in art school. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And at the end of my education in art school, I had to take an elective, two electives. And what I had been left with were filmmaking and photography because I'd taken all the other electives. And I tried not to take them. And they informed me that if I didn't, I wouldn't graduate. So I took them both, and somebody saw my photographs as next to my drawings and said, "You're a much better photographer." and
a career was born.
That basically was the beginning of it.
Interesting.
I grew up with an uncle who was a photographer who did weddings, and that's what I thought photography was, and I didn't want to do that.
So going into this burgeoning career, you didn't want to do weddings. What did you decide you wanted to do?
I wanted to shoot pretty girls.
Okay,
Fashion.
yeah. And obviously you did.
I still do.
You still do shoot pretty girls,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And we'll get into some of your work soon here. But you've gone on then to shoot, let's see, Sarah Jessica Parker.
Yes.
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Michelle Gellar.
And
Gina Davis.
Gina Davis, who's now the President of the United States,
That's right.
Commander-in-Chief.
Susan Lucci. It's a long list of people that I've worked with.
So, and aside from celebrities, you've also shot some very important artists like Philip Johnson,
Yes.
the architect,
Right.
and musicians.
And Richie Havens. A lot of people, a lot of different artists.
And actually, your Richie Havens portrait, one of them, I should also add, hangs in my office. So anyone who wants to wander by Donnell Road in the Nelson's Garage Building can come see some of E.J.'s works on display in my office.
Thank you.
So, celebrity, you've done celebrity profiles,
Right.
you've done family. Can you
Family
talk
portraits.
about some of the different works that you've done, the different areas?
When I came to New York, I came here to do fashion photography, and that was in 1980. So I started off shooting fashion. Most of it was commercial for advertising. My first client was Lakes Pantyhose when they first came on the scene, when they first invented the egg. Actually, one of my first models for that was Gina Davis. She was a
legs model.
She was a model with the Zoli Model Agency in New York.
Wow.
And then she went into Tootsie. She disappeared and did that movie.
Uh-huh.
So I shot fashion for lots and lots of people, big catalogs, some editorial for magazines, and then I started shooting portraits. And that's when I started working in music.
Doing a lot of covers.
Well, I shot a lot of covers for a lot of entertainment magazines. I worked with all the daytime TV shows in New York.
And your work, I know, has appeared in USA Weekend. It's appeared in, let's see, New Jersey Monthly, obviously.
Harper's Bazaar, New York Times, lots of major magazines.
Okay.
I've worked in advertising. I've shot advertising campaigns that have been billboards across the country. I've worked in Los Angeles and New York for the last 20 years.
And what do you think, in your 25 years now of doing this as a profession, what, obviously you can't, we could talk for hours about this, but what have you learned and what have you gleaned from the profession in terms of becoming a better photographer?
Oh, well, what I've learned from the profession is that there's the business and then there's the art. And being a good businessman doesn't mean you're a great photographer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of really great photographers who don't do very well at business. I've learned that it's getting harder as time goes on. It's becoming easier for people to get into it because the digital age has changed everything.
And when did that start happening?
Well, I think it really started happening a little less than 10 years ago, and now it's just snowballing. It's moving at just at light speed.
So for the most part, if I understand this, photographers used to shoot with like 35 millimeters, right, of film.
Right,
film. And more, just as consumers today are shooting on digital cameras, so are professionals?
Oh, yes, most professionals are 90 to 100% digital now.
And is that because of the ease of it, the manipulation of it?
The speed of it. Clients can walk home the same day they hire you to work with everything. They're done.
With the image?
Yeah.
Okay. And speaking of that, let's look at some of your images. We've got some with us today. This right here, some of you will recognize as Melissa Joan Hart, correctly?
Correct.
Yeah, we found out some of the guys in the studio have a crush on her. Or
Still.
at least, still, yes, still have a crush on her. And this was for a film, correct?
For NBC television.
For NBC television.
Yeah.
I think you're okay there with your mic. And this, you had referred to some of your catalog work.
Yeah, with some of my fashion business was, one of my biggest clients was a Japanese fashion designer, Tematsu.
And those are two images right there.
Yeah.
Of that style of work.
Actually interesting, one was done for the plus size market and one was done for the regular women's size market.
Really?
Same clothes, different size.
Different size.
Yeah.
Now going from this commercial catalog work, we'll switch to, this is a portrait you've done of a couple, right?
This was an engagement portrait done for a friend of mine, a photographer, for her wedding announcement.
Now, can you talk to us, E.J., a little bit about what's the difference between the catalog work you did, what it takes to do that, versus what it takes to do this personal couple image?
Oh, well, the catalog work, the commercial work is really, there's a lot of production value. There's a lot of, making that job happen, doing it on time, doing it on budget, doing it and making sure that it's done well. So there's a lot of outside things that come in that need to be managed, whereas this is a very personal process. This is, I was left on my own. This is my vision of them. I could do whatever I want. She allowed me that, and this is the way I saw it.
So when you go into a commercial shoot, it's very directed for you. They have a certain idea of what they want you to do. They try to make you conform to that?
Right. Sometimes I'm involved in that, in the development of the concept, so it's partially my idea, but it's very well planned ahead of time.
Whereas when you're working with a couple like this,
that was very serendipitous.
Or here with this family, this allows you to be a little more creative, get your personality more engaged in the shoot.
More of my art, I believe, is in this work.
And I think this is a really good example of what people at home can do in terms of reconceiving family shots. For instance, Christmas is coming up soon, Hanukkah, Christmas cards, New Year's cards, and many families decide to incorporate pictures in their greetings. And I think this is a great example, E.J., of a real personal, creative, fun shot of a family, very unique, that's going to stand out and really represent who these people are.
I agree. I think it's really a statement on who those people are.
And I'm sure they loved it.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
That was planned for a year.
This was planned for a year?
Well, the idea came a year, and a year later I talked to them over the year that this is how I'd like to do it, so I went back to the Poconos, threw them in the lake in October, and did the photograph.
It was a little chilly.
It was
yeah,
pretty cold.
I would say. Okay, and moving on, we've got these last two images that I think are stunning. And I'm curious about these images for a couple reasons. One, tell me if I'm wrong, but as an amateur, it seems that they might have been manipulated after you took the shot. And two, these are your children, so you're also a dad coming at your subject, which must be interesting.
Well, it's great because I always have subjects.
True, but can you see your subject as objectively when it's your own children? As objectively?
Sometimes, yeah, I think I can. I think I can. And I think I can because they are so used to the camera that they don't just automatically smile when I point it at them.
Because you're shooting them all the time.
Yeah, there's always a camera somewhere.
So
that was manipulated.
And how did you manipulate this and also this last shot? Can you talk about some of the manipulation?
Yes. In this particular image, those two beams of light going up the right side of the image were actually added into the photograph after it was created.
So in the development process, you added those images?
Digitally. That's done in Photoshop.
In Photoshop,
Right.
using computer, okay.
And then also the glare, the sparkle on their sunglasses was also added.
No, it's really cool. It's sort of like, you know, the Second Coming or something, or, you know, aliens are arriving, or actually, it also reminds me of an eclipse.
It was actually
Very sort of 50s throwback picture.
It does have that look. It was actually inspired by the lights of the Twin Towers. Right, it was done right around the same time, of the first year or second year that they did the lights in New York for the Twin Towers in New York, and that's why I sort of added that.
And the sepia is a nice touch.
Yeah, it was actually captured digitally in color, and I transferred it to black and white.
Yeah, very, very nice.
Thank you.
And Howard, I want to introduce now Howard Stein, who's here in our studio with us as well, and also a photographer. Howard, tell us how you got into photography and how for you, photography is not your profession, although I do know you made a living for a while.
I did.
So can you talk to us about how you approach photography as a love, as a hobby?
Well, it actually started pretty simply. My father gave me a camera when I was 18 years old. And I started shooting pictures around the house, and I really enjoyed the ability to develop the pictures and play with the medium. And I went into the service, and I was told never to volunteer for anything, and I volunteered for two things. One was submarines, and the other was to be the ship's photographer. And I learned a lot technically about the craft in the service, and when I got out of the service, I continued to shoot. And I chose, for the most part, static subjects. I chose things that people look at every day, but I chose to kind of hone in on them.
Well,
close-ups.
if I may, I want to make a note here that on your website, imagesandsteel.com, you make a point of saying that part of your philosophy is to try to get people to see what they see all the time but don't really see.
Look at, yeah.
So how do you do that?
It's difficult, and it's not always successful, but what I like to do is I really like to take a subject out of context. I have a favorite place that I shoot. I can't divulge where it is, but it's an old junkyard. And in the junkyard, there are scattered around old toys that are just exact copies of the huge rusting hulks that are there. What I did is I took shots of those toys on the other trucks. So I forced you to look at what I'm seeing, because I find it fascinating. Now, some people don't find it fascinating.
Well, speaking of that, we have two of your works with us today. If we can look over here at them, your top one, can you tell us about the first photo of the fish?
That was taken about 4 years ago in Lake Mead outside of Las Vegas. And I was simply walking down a gangway looking at the lake, which is quite a sight. And as I was walking, I noticed all of these fish just boiling at the surface of the water. And I spent about 15 minutes just kind of looking through the camera lens until I saw this one fish just looking up at me. And I shot it, and I got lucky. I got a great shot.
And what about your second one there?
The second shot was taken in New Jersey. I love nautical things. I have a whole theme on nautical that'll be on the website in a couple of months.
And it also reflects your textures. You talk about texture.
I love texture, and I love the way that photography can reveal the texture and the warmth of a particular shot. I'm very funky about having things in sharp focus, and what I do a lot of times is I work with what's called depth of field, so that the background is fogged and the foreground is in focus, or vice versa. And that forces you to look at the image that I'm looking at.
We're going to talk with you a little later about sculpture. I want to thank you both for talking about photography with us briefly.
You're welcome.
And I also want to encourage our viewers to check out their websites. E.J. Carr, a professional photographer, ejcphoto.com. And we have Howard Stein with us, who is a photographer and a sculptor, imagesandsteel.com.
Hello! You sit. Spot sit. Good boy.
All those extra treats. That's good.
And excitement. just went to the best home, man.
That is so awesome.
Had to pull away.
Welcome back to Meet the Artist. I'm here again with Howard Stein, photographer, but this time we are going to talk about Howard's sculpture, which I find fascinating. Howard, I came to discover your work on the SOMA Studio Arts Tour last year, I believe. I saw on the map that there would be sculpture out in your yard, and I was drawn right away, and as I got there, they made me laugh. I loved them. And another reason I love them is that you use found objects and recycled objects for your sculpture.
Always.
So can you tell us the story about how you started doing this? Because that's pretty cool too.
Well, it's pretty simple. Anyone who knows anything about old automobiles knows that in order to keep them on the road, you have to learn how to do certain things. And I had, at one time, 3 Toyota Land Cruisers, the old Jeep styles. And the Japanese did not know how to make them from rusting. And in order to keep them together, you had to learn how to weld. So the first thing I bought was a welder. And after many years of working on Land Cruisers and using them, I had all of these parts laying around. And I didn't have any more Land Cruisers. I had sold them all off. I had the welder and all the parts, and the welder was destined to go into a garage sale. And one day I was kind of just noodling around with a couple of spark plugs and an old camshaft, and I just started tacking them or welding them together. And it kind of mushroomed.
So it kind of grew out of your imagination.
Yeah,
and
which is vivid. So.
Right, and let's see your imagination at work. We've got your Adam ant here.
Yes, this is Adam. Adam is made out of an ice tong. Those of you who are over 40 years old know what an ice tong is, but those of you under don't know.
Is that at the front there?
That's at the front. These are the jaws of the ant. It's semi-anatomically correct as well. The tanks are helium tanks that people throw away in the dump.
That you painted, right?
That I painted, yes. The whole thing has been stripped down and painted. Some of it times I paint, some I don't. And these are just reflectors from old bicycles. So that's basically what it boils down to.
And we've got your turtle over here.
My turtle, yes. His name is Sluggo. Turtle is made out of an old muffler from a truck that was thrown out. It's made out of stainless steel, so it's very heavy.
Is that the green part?
Actually, that's part of the green part here.
Okay.
And the front. This is a wok.
That's a wok turned upside
down.
down.
A wok turned upside down.
That you've secured onto.
That I've welded with the handles. The 2 rings on the front are races for bearings. If you know anything about bearings, that's what they are. The bottoms are actually the shifters from the Toyota Land Cruisers. I had a bunch of them. And the tail is an old spring that I just took out. You can't really see the spring.
Yeah, that's.
But it's here.
I see. And another curly objects, we have your.
Now, I do
wheels
a lot of.
here.
I do people. I do large people, very large people, like 7 or 8 feet. I do animals of all kinds and some fictitious.
Well, let's talk about this.
And this is an abstract that I do. I have many abstracts. This happens to be made out of all old bicycle gears. I've done a couple of these. One of them was a commission, and for people who are cycle enthusiasts.
Oh,
so they love them, and I love the juxtaposition of the chain, which is one continuous chain all the way through.
That's
and I
awesome.
don't finish it except to clean it and polish it.
Well, speaking of finishing, we are going to get to work now. You're going to show us kind of how you do this. This is a work in progress that you've got here on the table?
Yeah, this is something that I just started working on today. This is part of shear for doing hedges. Someone threw it out. You see it's quite rusty. I don't know if you can actually see that, but it's very rusty. And what I did is I decided to cut them.
To create those feet?
To create feet.
Now,
these are welded.
Let me ask you a question. When you first had this form, do you look at it, Howard, and go, that could be a torso, that could be a body?
Yeah, what I basically do is I kind of stare at all the stuff. I have tons of stuff in my yard. And I look at the things, and sometimes they just say to me, okay, I want to be a body, I want to be a head, I want to be a foot, I want to be eyes, I want to be ears, I want to be hair. I make hair out of chains.
Right, because this You had asked me earlier about this. This to me looks like it could be girl's hair.
But
You know, like a little inner.
it's not, and you're going to see what it is.
So what do you do with it?
What I see with it. Well, first of all, does anyone know? Well, I'm
It's a
asking you a
handlebar,
question.
right?
It's handlebars.
Okay.
You know, it's like, it's from a kid's little
Bicycle.
chopper bike.
Okay.
Okay, actually, it's from a BMX. But what we do, stuff falls all over the top. I made feet, so this is the legs, and this is part of the torso. And this is what attaches handlebars to a bicycle. So we just put that in here, and we can tighten that down. Normally I would weld it.
Okay.
And what I've done, I played with this afternoon for half an hour or so, and I came up with an idea of doing this. So what happens is this becomes something.
You tighten that screw.
Yeah, and like I said, normally I would weld it once I
Right.
decided
And
what I
thank you so
wanted.
much for giving us an idea of what you do in your shop.
Okay, so we're going to tighten this because it needs to be tightened just a little bit. Okay, so that becomes that.
Okay.
And now I'm saying to myself, something's missing. Maybe it's a head. So
boy.
what we do is we have, this is an ice chopper.
Ice chopper.
Actually,
Just
you're
a
holding it apart.
rusty old
An
ice
old
chopper.
ice chopper that somebody threw away. It actually goes like this. The stick would go in there
Yeah.
for that. And, okay, that could be a head. Well, that's kind of interesting. So that's one idea. Sometimes
So
what I
you
do is
kind of-
I chop it off.
So you kind of fiddle to see
Oh, I
what
play.
could work there. You
I
play.
always play. I move it back and forth and play. This is actually was
A
a
hoe?
hoe
Uh-huh.
that I bent, and that could be put on here to be another type of head.
A now reformed hoe.
Of a form hoe, yes.
Sorry,
Oh boy,
sorry.
that was dangerous.
Yes.
And this
well,
is
when
another
I'm
one.
around you, it kind of happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is another thing. This is a device that's used in to make a straight line in a garden or something.
Okay.
And I have clamped on, which you do a lot before you actually weld, a couple of springs. They're actually valve springs off of an engine
Oh, that's
for
kinda,
eyes.
That's kind of funky.
So I might be able to do that.
Uh-huh.
I also could take a piece like this, which was a cut off if someone threw it away, and this could be a nose.
Oh, yeah.
So at different sizes. So you play until you come up with what you like. I could also put eyebrows on it.
It's kind of like puzzle pieces, but you're creating your own puzzle.
Right. And what I do is I know that I've made a piece when it works when I start to laugh at it,
Right.
because all of my pieces have a sense of humor.
Yes, they
And
do.
to me, that's the key. These are roller skate wheels. I know no one out there knows what roller skates are. They're not inline skates. They're roller skates. They're a little wider
Right,
than
we
inline
know
skates.
roller skates.
You do.
I do, yeah.
But we can put these on here to make eyes,
Oh, that's neat.
so you could have an eye.
Uh-huh.
Or they could actually be put up here for eyes, because we can do different things with them.
And as you're playing with this, once you decide how you want to do it, then you figure out how to attach it, right?
Attaching
Okay.
it is welding it. But in order to
Okay.
weld, one of the secrets of welding is that you have to completely clean the material.
Okay.
So it has to be absolutely clean.
Spotless.
Pretty spotless.
Okay.
So when they're heavily rusted, which most of the things are that I get, in order to weld them, you literally, and I don't know if you can get a close-up of the weld here. I'll try to hold it still. You'll notice that it's rusty here and it's clean here. In order to make a good tight weld,
Now, let me ask you a
you have to do
question.
that.
Did you added this piece to
No.
be the connector?
no, that was on there already. I
So-
actually cut it.
So the weld merely melts the steel into the other steel
Yes.
to connect it.
One of the challenges with working with found objects is that there are different types of steel.
Uh-huh.
There's stainless steel, there's mild steel, there is nickel type steel, there is cast iron, which is also steel. Anything that a magnet will stick to, you can weld. The problem is that there are different hardnesses and softnesses, and it takes a lot of knowledge of the metal, so you have to understand metallurgy a little
To
bit.
know what's
how
gonna
what'll go
fuse.
together.
Okay.
You can put almost anything together. You can't actually weld brass
Uh-huh.
to steel unless you use brass material to weld it.
Okay.
You use stainless steel material to weld stainless steel to steel. In order to weld other things, you have to use different materials.
So if you were in your shop, you would obviously have your welder's cap,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah, a lot of physical protection,
And your
because
goggles.
you can't look at a weld when anyone's welding. You can't look at it with the naked eye. You'll burn your retinas,
Okay.
and it's permanent.
Okay.
This is an example of a foot.
Oh, right.
So you can imagine a very large piece having a foot like this. What this is actually is a brake rotor from a car. This one happens to be from a car. That's been cut. I cut it on an industrial hacksaw, and I make it into a foot, and I attach something to it here.
Howard, as I mentioned to our viewers, I've been to your house and I've seen the sculptures that you have in your yard, and that foot reminds me that you have a really huge piece in your backyard. What's the largest sculpture that you've made so far?
I have one piece that's 9 feet.
9 feet. What?
And it's all abstract.
Yeah.
It's made out of brake drums and all kinds of other parts.
Now, what's the smallest one that you've made?
The smallest one. Well, recently, I kind of worked with, I actually want to show you one that's finished. We're going to lay this down.
Okay.
We're going to come back here, and this is not totally finished, but it's almost finished.
Uh-huh.
And as you can see, I
That's
don't know if you
great.
can get this, these are a handlebar.
Uh-huh.
These are forks from a bicycle.
Uh-huh.
This is an old hoe top, springs. The nose was just a piece. And I fabricate hands out of sheet metal.
Yeah, how did you do this?
I have a metal cutter, and I just trace it out, and I draw a hand, and I make hands out of it.
That's so
and
great.
then I can actually bend the hands in or out. And I'm toying with the idea of doing other things. Recently, a friend of mine, who happens to be a major Yankee fan, had his hip replaced.
Uh-huh.
And I had no idea. The guy has everything, so I didn't know what to make for him. And so I decided to make a hip replacement Yankee fan. So
That's great.
I used the Yankee hat that you get at the stadium when you eat ice cream. And I made little hands. And this is a clamp for a exhaust system. This is a tongue for a towing hitch. And these are the pieces that go for the pedals for bicycles.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right here. And he now has metal in his hip. So he has metal hips.
Have you shown your friend this yet?
He has seen it, but he hasn't seen it complete with the hat.
Are you
He
going
only
to give it to him?
Yes, of course. And that's basically it. So.
Well, I want to ask you, thank you for sharing this so much with us today. And I want to ask you, for people watching, you know, what do you recommend in terms of getting started for found objects? Just start with anything that inspires you?
Well, yeah, you start that way. You will get a lot of people annoyed at you in your house if you start collecting for no reason.
Uh-huh.
I'm a squirrel, and I have to deal with that. But I have ideas in mind when I look for pieces now, because I'm always thinking about what is. I passed a 50-gallon drum a couple of months ago, and what I made out of it was a elephant, a baby elephant.
Well,
and it's
I
called
wanna-
Drumbo.
Drumbo, I love that. Well, please, everyone, go to the Studio Arts Tour next year in Maplewood and South Orange. Go by his house on Maplewood Ave and see his works. You can also go to imagesandsteel.com. Thanks a lot, Howard Stein. We've had a lot of fun.
My pleasure. So you like it?
I love this. Yeah, are you going to give it to him? Yeah.
And this will be painted.